You are now listening to the Going North podcast, where you'll receive tips and techniques to advance yourself. I'm your host, Dom Brightman, and every week we're going to be hearing from an author who's going to share their expertise to help you charge forward in life. On a quick side note, be sure to check out Going North the book. It's available in ebook, audio, as well as paperback form for those who love to read a traditional book. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, we're bringing some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today's no different, but it's kind of different. There's these folks out there who have a heart of a servant and help our youth on the way to creating a dynamic life. And a lot of them tend to do that. Some of them don't, but darn it, that's what happens when they don't listen to these types of wonderful people right here. Some call them warriors, some call them champions, some call them soldiers. Well, this person is not only an author, she's also all of those as well as an ESOL teacher. So let's give it up for Miss LC herself, Miss Laurel Conran. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing fabulous.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I'm excited to talk about my new book that just came out. And the new book is a children's book, and the title is Off She Goes to Mexico.
Beautiful. So why does she go to Mexico?
And I don't know, we'll find out.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed.
I know, a lot of my students have asked me for a sequel to this book. I might have them write it for me.
Delegation, right?
Absolutely.
Sweet. Well, before we get into the book, let's get to know the lovely lady behind the book. So who is the lovely Laurel?
Well, like you said, I am an ESOL teacher, and I raise monarchs for the school science unit. And the county was looking for monarch buddies that could provide teachers with monarchs and caterpillars and milkweed. And since I have a certified Monarch Waystation, I volunteered. So for those of you who don't know what a Monarch Waystation is, it's a garden that provides food and habitat for the struggling monarch butterfly population. And a waystation must include at least 2 types of milkweed, which is the host plant for the monarchs. And monarchs only lay eggs on milkweed. So caterpillars feed exclusively on the leaves of the milkweed, which is the only host plant for this butterfly species. So as much milkweed is critical for the survival of monarchs. And without it, they can't complete their life cycle and their population will decline. So I really thought it was a great idea to write this book.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about. So what led you to write a book? Was it from your teaching?
Well, about 12 years ago, we had a large influx of refugees attending our school, and I was researching children's books about refugee children and that my students could relate to. So I was doing some researching, and I came across a couple of books. One of them was My Name is Sun Gold and 4 Feet, 2 Sandals. And my students love these stories, and I created this thematic unit around these stories. So I decided to write the author, which is Karen Lynn Williams, and I just thanked her for writing and sharing these stories. And after exchanging many emails, she encouraged me to write a children's book about my experiences. And then one day she said to me, you know, Laurel, you need to write a children's book about monarchs. I'm like, monarchs? And she knew about my certified Monarch Waystation, and she knew how I raised monarchs. So, well, to make a long story short, one beautiful October day, it was a grandma weekend with my granddaughter. So I had about a dozen monarchs that had just declosed, and they were ready to let go. So we took a walk out into my garden, And I was showing her the monarchs and explaining how they need to fly to Mexico with the other monarchs when it's warm. So we unzipped my little mesh cage. That had about a dozen monarchs in there, and one by one, they flew away into the sky. And my granddaughter, she was waving goodbye to them. And so as we were wishing a bon voyage, and they all went to Mexico, and we were just waving goodbye. So I thought about it for a minute. I said, you know what? A story was just born, and I got to writing it.
Sweet, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. It's funny how everyday moments become stories that you
Yes,
turn
yes,
into
they
books
do.
later.
Yes, they do. Dom, I get a lot of my ideas from reading from other children authors' books. Some of my favorite authors are Eric Carle, Jan Brett, Mark Brown, Tommy DePola, Marie Sendak, and many, many more. And for me, I like to take these experiences and make it a story. Why not? And so at the time I was writing this story, I was having difficulty with these they're called taconid flies, and they were killing all of my monarch caterpillars in the garden. And what these taconid flies, we call them tea flies, they would lay their eggs on them, and then the eggs would hatch, and the fly larva would feed off the caterpillar as it was their host for survival. And then my caterpillars would turn black and wither up and die. Disgusting it was. And so that summer I lost about 30 caterpillars. So I found one little caterpillar on the milkweed leaf, and she had like little eggs buried on top of her. So I took a pair of tweezers and I carefully popped them before the eggs could bury them all the way into the caterpillar. I didn't know if the caterpillar would make it or not, so I named her Hope. And you read about Hope in a story. So these experiences raising the monarchs and watching my granddaughter help me develop the story. And I would just watch how her eyes were just mesmerized watching the caterpillars and the monarchs, especially when they were coming out of their chrysalis. And she would watch these crumpled up wings go stretch, stretch, stretch. And my granddaughter, she loves onomatopoeia words. So as you read my story, you will see a lot of onomatopoeia words because it helped her hear the word as I was describing the movements, such as, they're coming out of their chrysalis, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And they would fly off, flitter, flitter, flutter, slurp, slurp, slurp. And I wanted to make this story interactive, as I knew mostly adults would be reading the story to their children. And I also wanted to make it fun and educational too.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. Fun and interactive. Fun and interactive. Kind of like a teacher's duty when it comes to the younger ones,
Yes,
especially.
yes, absolutely.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, what really led to you having this whole farm of monarchs, especially with the caterpillars and everything? That's not something you hear about every day.
No, I don't know. Since I was a child, I guess, as a child, I found that the monarchs were kind of very mystique and they're beautiful. And, they are the only insect that migrates to Mexico. They fly about 2,500 miles each away. And that's about 50 miles a day they can fly. And the monarch butterflies, they spend their winters in the Sierra Madre Mountains in the states of Mexico and the Michoacan, which is west of the Mexico City. And another fact about monarchs that most people don't know is that monarch butterflies may take 5 generations to migrate back to the U.S. Did you know that, Dom? 5 generations.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, for example, they're all flew to Mexico last October, November. They're there hibernating. So when they start to fly back north, they usually start around March. And I already hear the people in Texas are starting to see the monarchs now. Lucky them. So they're seeing the monarchs. So these monarchs have been hibernating. They're flying. They're in Texas. They're laying their eggs, and then they die. So the new caterpillars emerge from the eggs. This is the first generation. And then they go through the life cycle, and they become monarchs. And these monarchs are flying further north. They lay their eggs and die. And as soon as these caterpillars emerge, this is the second generation. So by the time they reach us up in the north and further north, they are like the third or the fourth generation. And that's usually around July, August, okay? So when the fifth generation becomes a monarch, they do not mate. They're called the migrators. They don't mate, they don't lay eggs. So at this time, the weather is getting much cooler, and they spend several months in, we call it diapause, which is a hormonally controlled state of dormancy that aids winter survival. So this is the fifth generation that flies to Mexico, and they also live the longest because they're hibernating there till about February, March. And then they lay their eggs and die, and the generation starts all over again. Isn't that fascinating? I just find that fascinating.
Sounds like you love nature.
I do. I absolutely love nature. And you know what, Dom? I really think it's important to teach our children about nature, because when children care for living things, it helps them build empathy. And children, I've noticed, are very innate scientists, and they love to experience the sights, the scents, the sounds, and textures of the outdoors. And also, nature provides countless opportunities for discovery, creativity, problem solving, and even our STEM education. And interacting with natural environments allows children to learn by doing and experimenting with ideas. I tried to get that across in the story. As a little girl in the story, she's 8 years old. Her name is Eva. And when she goes out into her little monarch garden, you know, she's enjoying the beauty of the day, the beautiful October fall day. And she goes and she picks up a little caterpillar, and she just enjoys the caterpillars crawling up and down her arms, you know, tickle, tickle, tickle. And then she looks down and she sees this little caterpillar with little white spots on him. So she picks up the little caterpillar and she runs into her house, and she's like, Lolly, Lolly, and that's her grandmother. And she goes, what's on this caterpillar? And Lolly looks at the caterpillar and she says, I don't think she's going to become a butterfly. And she goes, but why? And she goes, well, those are eggs, they're tachinid fly eggs, and they're going to make her very, very sick. So all of a sudden, little Eva, she's got to do something about it. She feels like that she needs to save this butterfly. So you'll have to read the rest of the story to find out what happens to her.
Oh, yeah, sounds interesting indeed. And you mentioned how you should probably have some of your students write the sequel or at least another book to add on to the story. So, any thoughts on what the follow up book might be?
Well, my students are asking me, does she make it to Mexico? And I said, well, I don't know. Do you think she'll make it to Mexico? So what we did a couple months ago, my students, they drew pictures, and they drew a lot of pictures of some of the problems monarchs face when they're flying, such as one little boy, he drew a picture of a bird eating my butterfly. I go, what? You got a bird eating my butterfly? He goes, yep, he's all gone. And then another little girl, she she drew a picture that the monarch fell into the ocean. Well, that was funny. And then another little girl, she drew a picture. She goes, yeah, he found a friend. She found a friend, and they did make it to Mexico. And I said, oh, I love that story. Thank you. But they each had a different twist to it. It was really funny. I enjoyed the stories.
Ah, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. It's great that you enjoy the stories too, and it can show off and show out in your work too. So that's fabulous. Especially looking out for that sequel, indeed. Especially since the book is still pretty new, I think. Right? It's been what, 3 months?
Yes, it came out. The book came out in October. It's Off She Goes to Mexico, and it's on Amazon. So if you just type in Off She Goes to Mexico, it should come right up. And we just finished the Spanish version too. I have a friend who's also a teacher. She lives in Panama, and that's the country Panama, and she translated my story into Spanish because she fell in love with the story, and she wanted to share the story to her children and her country as well. So we've been quite busy.
Sweet. Sounds like the good busy.
Yes, love it.
Woohoo! Well, as you're out and about promoting this book, is there a question you wish more folks would ask you about the book?
What prompted you to come up with this storyline? And like I said, will there be a sequel? Are you going to write more books? And yes, I will. I'm working on another book right now. So that's kind of in the making. I love writing. And that's pretty much what people have been asking me about, and also the Monarch Waystation. And a lot of people ask me about monarchs and the milkweed. Why do they need milkweed? Why do we have that monarchs are declining? And that's because a lot of the land with milkweed has been torn down for make buildings, and therefore the monarchs don't have a place to lay the eggs. Like I said before, the milkweed is the only plant that monarchs can lay their eggs on, because the monarch caterpillar, that is what they feed on to get through their life cycle. So without the milkweed, there would be no monarchs. So a lot of people are interested. I know for Christmas this year, I took some empty egg cartons, and put some dirt and some milkweed seeds in them as gifts. And I kind of gave those as gifts to encourage people, including my students, encourage them to have a small monarchs garden. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to go out and relax in the evening, eat outside in the evening during the summer months, and enjoy the beauty of nature. It really is. I have a nice monarch garden. We sit out there with our friends and just enjoy our time together, watching what all nature has to offer outside.
Sweet. So you think that one day you're gonna write a full-blown children's novel of like maybe 200 to 400 pages?
I would like to. In fact, several people have asked me about that. So I would like to very much to write a chapter book. I would also like to write a book about refugee children coming to America, and some of the challenges that they go through, adapting to a new culture, making new friends. I have a few storylines I've been working with, and I've been interviewing people with and talking to them. So as a writer, you really got to do a lot of research, interviews, speak with people, and that's kind of what I've been doing.
Ah, fabulous indeed, fabulous indeed. And any advice for those listening that want to publish a children's book of their own?
I would say do it and don't wait. Just write, use what you have, talk about your experiences. Everybody has a story. Everybody goes through life, and everybody has a story to write, a story to tell, and to share it. I went through the publisher, self-publishing. It's called Palmetto Publishing Group, and they've been wonderful. They walked me through the steps of getting the book published. And they also have, they've gone through the Better Business Bureau. So I trusted them very much, and they were very helpful and got me on my way. So very grateful for them. They're very, very professional. And everybody has a story to tell and to share it.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about, indeed. And so true. There are so many stories to share and to tell because folks can learn from 'em. Heck, that's how we've been learning for hundreds and thousands of years before we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, speaking of stories and sharing, is there advice that you would give to your 25-year-old self, but if she was in 2020 instead of 3 years ago?
So I would say don't wait. Write. I always have a journal. I have a travel journal. I love traveling, and I take my journal with me and I write everything down. And I go back. So when I was writing this story, I had to go back to my journal and look up a few things and just write things down, what you see, and reading other people's books, studying their style, what makes a good book sell, what do people want, what do people want to read, what's interesting to them. Talk to people, interview people, and it's wonderful to be able to write a book and share your story and get the feedback from your readers. It's really important. So I would ask you to buy the book on Amazon, and I appreciate the feedback. That's really important to authors. What does the readers want to read? What do they like? It's really important for authors to know that. And that encourages us to write what the readers want to read.
That's what I'm talking about right there. Going ahead, pick up some copies of that book, especially if English is not your first language and it's Spanish, because we have a Spanish edition. Woohoo!
Absolutely. And I've got the Spanish book out also.
Yes, indeed. So go ahead and pick up 33 copies of that book. Share with your friends, your family, your cat. Heck, even if there's a butterfly statue in your home, share with the butterfly statue. It gets to look at itself. It might even get to take a selfie, even though the pictures might be a little more colored than the statue and all that wonderful goodness. So for those who want to keep in touch with you, Laura, and follow your writing career, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, and my Facebook page is called Teaching and Traveling. So go ahead and like my page.
Woohoo! Who needs a double T diner when you're teaching and traveling? That's what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's what I'm talking about. And over that Facebook page, keep a good watch on what she's doing. Be on the lookout for book number 2, so that way some twins can happen. Well, maybe not twins, but the second baby will appear in literary form. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, any parting words for the folks still listening, Laurel?
Well, any parting words? Well, here is just a quick summary of the book. So in this heartwarming, uplifting tale, Eva works to solve the problem by creating a monarch habitat and protecting them from predators. Filled with excitement, energy, and passion, children will follow along as Eva delights in all that nature has to offer. And she might just save a caterpillar's life in the process. So off she goes to Mexico. I hope to see you there.
How's it going, you showstopper? It's great that you enjoyed this episode of the Going North podcast. If you really enjoyed it, be sure to shoot the guest an email or head over to the social media pages and leave them a nice response that you heard them on the Going North podcast, so that way they can continue to be inspired to do great things. And be sure to share this podcast with others that you think would enjoy it as well, because we want to inspire as many people as possible to live their dreams, embrace them, and to do something positive.